Hello, it's December 28th, 2014, and this is Overgrowth Weekly 88 with the Q&A session number 4, I suppose. My name is Lucas Orsman.
Hey, I'm Anton Reel.
I'm David Rosen.
And so let's jump right into the questions. I'm gonna have to excuse myself beforehand because I'm a bit sick today, so I'll try to not cough into the mic. All right. So will we just be going from the top here, Anton?
We can. Starting at about number 8 is where we left off from last week that we didn't get to.
Okay.
And then from there down are all relatively new questions. So if you want to go through those first.
Great. Okay, so Dahamana asks, when you started working on a sequel for Lugaru, you couldn't find any engine that was available and suited your needs, so you made your own engine, Phoenix. Eventually, when you finish Overgrowth, will you consider other engines like Unreal or Unity, as they are now available as a viable choice, or will you continue using and developing Phoenix for future projects that are similar to Overgrowth or an Overgrowth sequel?
Well, I'd like to at least use available engines for faster prototyping for future games. But I kind of like making a new engine for like final games because you have such good control of even the basics. Because otherwise, like I'll get some error messages from users for receiver on Linux, and I just can't do anything about it because it's a problem with Unity and not a problem with the game. And that's
Right.
kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. Have you tried using Unreal Engine 4?
I haven't yet. I would like to try it next time I have time to do a game jam, because it looks pretty powerful.
Yeah, it does. So I had another question about that. Do you feel like would an open source engine make sense for you then, or is it that you need to have your own engine so that you know your way around it 100%?
I don't know if there are any like industrial strength open source engines, or at least I'm not familiar with them. They might exist, but
Yeah.
I'd be hesitant to use one that hasn't been like very widely proven
Yeah. All right.
for deployment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I'm just thinking that could be maybe be a good middle ground on getting most of the work done already, but being able to also fix stuff. But yeah, like I say, I haven't heard of any existing project, but maybe it could be a cool thing for someone to do.
I think there's actually another related question further on, which sort of asks, like it looked like. Oh, sorry. The question's not quite as closely related as I thought, but ultimately what they ended up coming, like the second question is if there will be any more development on things like low light combat, the more Unity related games. Is that something you still plan on coming back to?
I'm not 100% sure. Like, I'd like to come back to low light combat and finish adding the new levels and fix the latency issues by adding like client-side prediction for movement.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to keep working on Overgrowth, and I've been
Right.
sensing a lot of impatience from the fans, so I'm hesitant to take any time away from Overgrowth for the other projects.
Right. This same question asked if you would release the source code for it. They said source code would, of course, also be useful.
Yeah, making low-light combat open source would certainly be a lot easier. Though making multiplayer competitive games open source also has a challenge with regards to cheating. But I
True.
bet the community is probably small enough that that wouldn't be an issue, because it would mostly be the hardcore who are playing it. So that's definitely something to think about.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And when we're talking about that, have you? I think you probably talked about this before, but I don't quite remember what you've said about it. Like open sourcing Overgrowth.
I think it would be cool. My only concern really is that the game marketplaces like Valve or the Mac store and so on are not. They might not really understand open source, like what happened with Lugaru on the Mac App Store. Like, it was old enough that it didn't really hurt us when someone cloned it on the Mac App Store. But if someone cloned Overgrowth on Steam or something like that, and Valve didn't take it down right away, then that would be a big problem.
Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Are you ever nervous about clones? People trying to not necessarily steal your code, but steal the game and like make their own version of Overgrowth. I mean, I know, like for example, there was that game Threes, right? And after it came out, almost immediately there were many clones on the iOS store, like 2048 and some of the other clones. Do you ever feel like people might try and do that with Overgrowth?
I think Overgrowth in particular isn't very vulnerable to that, because that's more of an issue with games that are very heavy on design work and very light on implementation work, like those ones. But Overgrowth is kind of the opposite. Like, it's a very simple idea with very complicated implementation. So it'd be really difficult for someone to just clone it straight up, I think.
Right.
Okay, moving on to another question then. Eric Guylab asks, will you be changing the hand-to-hand combat, or are you happy with the way they punch and kick?
I'm pretty happy with the basics of the strikes. I'd like to add a bit more grappling of some kind, but I don't think I'll change the punches and kicks much, aside from maybe adding more variety. Because right now we don't have that many different punches and kicks. I'd like to add some more animations for that, but not really much mechanical change to that.
So I think someone else was asking if you were planning to work on, are the animations still going to be tweaked further? So you're saying that maybe there's going to be more variety, but how much do you plan on maybe tweaking the current animations?
I want to change some of them, mostly the ones that are bad. Like, I like a lot of the combat animations. There are a few animations I don't like the rabbit jumping pose I'm not super happy with, and a couple others like that. But a lot of them might not change very much.
Makes sense.
Alright. Petzl asks, are you satisfied with the cats and female rabbits in terms of graphics? They both seem strange to me. Neither of them look as slick as I'd expect, though I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe their necks are too fat? The rabbit girl's arms seem a bit skinny and her face seems a bit too round at the nose. It could also have something to do with their animations. So I guess the question is, are you satisfied with the cats and female rabbits in terms of graphics?
I have some of the same concerns as this question, so I think we'll tweak those a bit. That's partly something to talk about with Aubrey, and also I'm going to try and add some features to have more control of tweaking the different body parts. Because right now we can make them wider. You can have like the fat rabbits and the strong rabbits, but I'd also like to add the ability to like stretch and shrink the bones, so you could have like longer, shorter arms. That should help with tweaking proportions to see what looks the best. Just adding variety.
Yeah.
Right.
And Dax Tart asks, will Wolfire send copies of Overgrowth to YouTubers to gain popularity? Imagine what a Pewdiepie video could do for your fan base. He has 20 million subscribers, and I think anyone would buy the game if they saw its potential in action.
Yeah, YouTubers definitely can help us a lot. Like, the Nerd Cubed video, the first one, really is what put us on the map in terms of sales. But I also don't want to be accused of like sending free stuff to reviewers, because there's still a bit of a witch hunt in some areas of the internet with regards to like people giving favors to journalists. I don't really want to dive back into that.
Yep.
I also read an article about a developer who had given out a bunch of free keys, and then he found them being sold online, I think, for cheaper price and stuff. So that could also be something like you don't want to give out too many free keys to people who say they are YouTubers. Maybe want to check them up and stuff. And this isn't just you, David, but like anyone who is making a game like this, I suppose.
Yeah, we definitely get a lot of people pretending to be YouTubers who actually aren't, and they're just fishing for keys.
Yeah.
We always do some due diligence on that.
Right.
And also the successful YouTubers, like, they make so much money that spending $20 for the game wouldn't break the bank, really.
Yeah. I don't think they actually care if they get the game for free or not. It doesn't change anything for them, really. True that.
Oh.
Here's Leica again.
I like.
She wanted to say hi.
Hello. That's always nice.
Sorry, keep going.
The Dax Tart also asks, I was wondering about the Snowblood Paladins. Aubrey created those guys a while ago, and I was wondering if they had been scrapped. As far as I know, there has been no news on this recently. Video in which they were introduced, and need links to a video there. I can link that in the chat.
We haven't been working on them recently, but we'll look into that more when we're kind of finalizing the story, I think. Right now we're still mostly kind of prototyping the levels and getting the gameplay nailed down. I always like to kind of start by getting all of the mechanics working, making some challenge levels, and then bringing that into the story.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a couple of questions, including this one, and then also about the characters earlier, which were sort of directed more towards Aubrey. Do you think Aubrey would ever join us for a Q&A?
Probably. I bet he would be interested.
Okay. Just, I figured I could ask him too, but, you know. Just thought I would see what he says. Yep.
Sweet.
So you should ask this first part. Yeah.
Should do that, not this thing?
Well, it's just oh yeah. You should you should read that whole question though.
Oh, okay,
I think.
Okay. It's a long ass question though, but I'm gonna read it. So some guy 720 asks, back in 2010, you wrote a blog post about the yin and yang of game design. You said the games are a medium whose potential their interactivity is often squandered. To make the most of this potential, it is important to achieve a good balance of player freedom and challenge. I know it might be a bit early to be tackling down gameplay for Overgrowth, but it seems to me like it's becoming a great sandbox combat game. When thinking about the balance of choice and challenge in Overgrowth, what are some ways that you want the player to be in control, and to what extent do you want the game to dictate what's happening? Are there any games out there right now that have a balance of freedom and challenge that is close to what you have in mind for Overgrowth?
Well, right now I'm thinking of having sort of sandbox levels rather than a whole sandbox game. So usually there's some kind of objective that the player has to accomplish to further the story, but it's up to them how to do it. There's a lot of different routes that they can take. So maybe more like Deus Ex or the original Thief game, kind of along those lines, and less like Grand Theft Auto or Assassin's Creed. So you can kind of choose what you're doing immediately, but you can't just run around throughout the world killing everyone.
Mm-hmm. Until we get mods that let you do that.
Yeah.
Alright. Shaker Jur asks, I think David once said we would meet the people from the comics. Now my question, what if we meet them, will there be several quest lines? And if so, will the characters meet up and use kinda the companion AI?
Companion AI? Well, there are different ways that characters can appear. Like, they could be protagonists that you can control, or they can be allies, or they can be, like, enemies they have to fight in a boss fight. So I think some of them might appear in all of those different roles. So we might use companion for some of them. So companion AI is also one of the most difficult kinds of AI to get right, because they can always get stuck on a corner or something. We'll have to see to what extent we can use that.
Right. Getting stuck on a corner was sort of similar to another question we didn't ask about how the pathfinding system currently works, and if you plan to improve that. It would certainly help in this kind of situation, right?
Yeah, and the pathfinding system helps, but there's always a few edge cases. Like you can find a hole in the wall that you can't walk through, but you can kind of ragdoll through. And you flip at just the right time, and you kind of fall through it, and then you get up on the other side, and then you might have your companion stuck on the previous side. So I have to figure out all of those different edge cases.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, companions in video games is always a hard thing, I feel like, because a lot of the time they just become a burden. Even if they don't get stuck on corners, they will often just be in the way or be annoying in one way or another. But I don't know.
Makes
yeah,
sense.
it's always a tough design issue. I'd probably want to make it so you have like pretty strictly different roles, like you're a scout and the other guy's a fighter, or vice versa, or some combination like that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
For sure.
The pathfinding question sort of made me think of a follow-up question, which had to do with more sort of parkour elements of the pathfinding. Is there would there ever be a way to teach AI how to wall run and maybe, you know, jump back and forth between locations, or is that kind of too tricky?
Yeah, I can add more parkour to the pathfinding for sure, so rabbits can jump around. Right now they're just set to use the ground-based pathfinding, like running, and they occasionally climb or jump off edges to follow you. But I want to do more of a full-fledged pathfinding for them. So they can have like parkour chases and so on.
Right. So you're currently using a solution for that, if I remember correctly, right? For how to do the pathfinding?
Yeah, there's this open source project called Recast and Detour, which automatically voxelizes a mesh and creates a nav mesh for it, for walking around on the ground. But it doesn't support jumping and climbing, so I have to do that myself.
Right. So that was
integrate
kind of where,
them.
Right. And I know that I think you had found a solution to one of the issues with one of those two open source projects in the past. Did you, which you submitted to them to have them implement? Would you add your sort of three-dimensional pathfinding to their open source projects? Would you contribute that again, or would you keep it proprietary within Overgrowth, within the Phoenix engine?
Well, I'd probably have it open source. Like, I was always happy with the idea of like open source modules, because then I can have it all available without risking the problem of just straight up submitting the same source code to the store, because they're not going to sell like Overgrowth pathfinding on Steam.
Who knows? They got software on there now and development tools, man.
That's true. So yeah, I'd be happy to distribute that, especially if anyone requests any particular aspect of the source code. I'm not really protective of it. I just don't want other people selling the entire game.
Right.
Alright. Carol asks, when will we see, or more like hear, the main theme on the menu? We know of it since like ages, yet it's not implemented.
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about doing that. I usually play it with the music off, but if the music's on, I don't see any reason why I couldn't just add it. So maybe I'll do that pretty soon.
I mean, it seems like there's a lot of different places where music still is yet to yet to be implemented. So the main theme, which he's talking about, but also I think level-based music rather than just whole game-based music. I think there's a lot of time.
The whole music system is still pretty early on.
Right. I know we had talked about and had built some dynamic music combinations as well, which I think are still a ways from being developed and released, right?
Yeah, I thought that worked really well on Receiver, so I'd like to bring more of that kind of idea into Overgrowth.
Right. I feel like the implementation we did for that was fairly simple but very effective.
Yeah.
So,
what library are you using for sound in Overgrowth?
It uses OpenAL at the most basic level.
Okay, cool. Okay, so another question from Carol. Is the old 2009 video with fluid physics, blood, etc. still a thing? May we see that stuff happening in the game in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that could work. I haven't added that yet, just because it's most appropriate for like really large quantities of blood. Like in that video, is kind of like throwing a water balloon full of blood at things. And the characters right now just don't bleed quite that much.
right.
But I still want to add, like if you kill someone from blood loss, then they should kind of bleed out on the ground, and then I'll need to do something for that kind of puddle that grows there.
Yeah.
It seemed like puddling would be the best case scenario. I could even see it, if you die on a ledge and it drips down the side of the ledge, that would be the closest to the video demonstration that you showed, right?
Yeah. Because I wanted Mortal Kombat, like giant water balloons of blood going everywhere.
Right.
We lost you there in the beginning of that answer. Could you repeat that again, please?
I want to keep the amount of blood in the game fairly believable. So I don't want to go like full on Mortal Kombat or Berserk type blood spray everywhere kind of approach.
We can probably... Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say we can probably include the question from insert name here, where he asks if you ever think of including dismemberment as a game mechanic, which we've asked you before, I know. So, but
The top priority.
right.
Yeah, I lost you again there. I heard the top priority.
So I meant to say it's not the top priority, but it would be fun to add that at some point.
Yeah. Just like silence for 5 seconds and like top priority.
Priority
Well,
1, dismemberment.
Yeah, it's good.
I heard the whole thing, so I hope it's not on your end, Lucas.
Yeah, it might be.
Mm. Okay.
All right. Are these two questions asked already?
Which one? Yes, we basically looked at those earlier.
Okay, cool. So it's just this one then. Akashi asks, do you ever feel pressured by the community about requests such as this Q&A, for example, knowing if you don't if you just don't do it, then people will get on your butt about it all?
Oh, we lost you that time, Lucas.
God damn it. Okay, so I'll repeat the question. Do you ever feel pressured by the community about requests such as this Q&A, for example, knowing if you just don't do it, then people will get on your butt about it all?
I usually don't feel pressure for very specific requests, but I feel pressure when there's just a lot of complaints about like, oh, there's nothing getting done, there's no progress in the last month, or things like that. So I get kind of like general vibes of impatience, or sometimes I see specific requests, but I can usually judge the specific requests on their merits and whether it's the top priority I should be working on right now.
It's always a good approach, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, yeah, do you feel like you'd get a lot affected by requests and stuff? Do you like take them most of them into consideration and so on when you hear them? Like how have requests and stuff like that and like suggestions affected the game, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think probably the biggest thing that affects the game is seeing mods and things like that, because then they have a proof of concept of like, does this feature make the game better or not? And if it does, then I'm more likely to include it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we have time for one last question, maybe? Or did you want to say anything else?
I was just going to ask if any of the mods have if any of the mods have influenced you in a way that you could point out. Like, I know that I saw some mods about jump control. I remember that was a mod, and they changed it so that when you jumped, you had to be moving in order to get that forward velocity. And later, you implemented something not exactly the same way, but a similar type concept. Are there any mods that you can point out as having, directly affected?
Well, that one's definitely a good example, because I thought
okay.
I thought it made it better, but they took it a little bit too far, I thought. So I kind of added a compromise so that, like, if you press forwards and jump it from a standstill, it adds some velocity, but just not full velocity.
Right.
And there's also maps that just showed off different kinds of parkour, like the more extreme ones where you have to wall jump a million times. And people seem to really like that, so I kind of wanted to add that as more of a official mechanic. They'll probably change the animation to look a bit less glitchy when you're like wall jumping back and forth.
That'd be cool.
And there's some of the mods that had water and waterfalls that looked really cool.
Yeah.
So that makes me think more about doing a more official version of that with the proper shaders and everything. Because it doesn't necessarily add too much gameplay challenge, depending on how it works.
Right.
I still have to figure out how it would work if you're both in water and you want to fight or something.
Yeah. Well, there have been some interesting hotspot type behavior that people have given to water that make it feel more or less like the water is truly affecting you, and which makes it essentially impossible to fight, but you do feel like you are underwater. So just hotspots that kind of slow your movement or make you ragdoll, or I've seen a video for a map where someone sort of has you spiraling down like a water spout that shoots you all over the place, and the character kind of tosses and turns. So all of those types of water behavior have essentially, they show you, hey, you can't fight here, but it still is water affecting you. So I'm not sure how easy it is to do sort of volumetric hotspots to fill a space, but that seems to always be my issue with the hotspot solution, is that the hotspots are cubes, and you have to sort of make it as big as possible without overlapping into areas where the water wouldn't be affecting you or something. So
yeah, there's a lot of tricky things with water to think about.
Yeah.
Right, which is why you sort of have always said that it wasn't a high priority.
Yeah, it's higher priority than dismemberment, but lower priority than a lot of other things.
Makes sense. Akazi is asking a follow-up question about What if in the water hotspot you go into an active fight ragdoll?
That's the kind of ragdoll where you like protect yourself.
I think so.
Well, then you have to get out of it somehow, so you don't just get stuck in the water like that.
Right.
Right now, I'm still trying to focus on the level editor for the current alpha. More particularly, now that we have so many thumbnails in the spawner, because Akazi made all of the thumbnails for all of the current objects.
Yay.
I kind of want to switch it from a simium to native code, which is a bit of a challenge, because then I can actively manage all of that visual memory and make it really fast.
Makes sense.
Great. So I think we're right about at the end here now. So that's some good info right there to finish with, I think. Yeah, as usual, ogweekly.com. You go ask your questions in the forums. We have a link to the thread there on ogweekly.com. Yeah, anything else? Man, I'm out of it.
Well, our next scheduled Q&A session should be January 11th. Same bat time, same bat channel. And well, that was an old reference.
Probably I don't understand everything. You're so old, Anton.
I know.
I can't believe it.
It was the old 60s Batman TV show with Adam West. At the end of every episode, it was, "We'll see you next time. Same bat time, same bat channel." And because everything was bat, everything in that show.
Yeah.
It was awesome and hilarious and terrible all at the same time.
Good.
So yeah, so January 11th, and Happy New Year to all of you all.
Yes. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Holidays. And yeah, tune in then. We need more questions, so ask the questions. Thank you for watching, and we will see you. Bye bye.
See you guys later.